Okay, so thanks everyone for coming this morning. So what I'm going to do, hopefully in the next sort of half hour, 35 minutes, is take you through some of our thoughts and experience on finding your niche in the cloud, and hopefully be an educational for some of you. So my name's Tony Lucas. I'm the founder and VP of Product for Flexiant, and Flexiant is a software company that builds cloud orchestration software solutions for service providers to build their own cloud platforms. What I just want to do now is take you through a quick potted history of how we are where we are today, to give you an idea of why we think we have quite intimate knowledge of the industry. So way back in 1997, which in cloud terms is basically prehistoric era, I started a small UK-based hosting company, which none of you have probably ever heard of. And we got a bit of a reputation for solving thorny problems for hosting clients. So we had problems like TV shows, football teams, that is the proper football teams, soccer, yes, too, and a whole variety of others. And they all had the same common theme, basically, which is bursty traffic. And so back in 2004, after one particular customer being hit with a 10,000% increase in traffic in the space of 10 minutes, because they got hit on the website Slashdot, for those of you who remember Slashdot, which kind of precursed Dig, for those of you that remember Dig. As it seems to be these days. Obviously, the theme of infrastructure as a service and being able to scale up and down on demand is quite common these days, but back then it was a real thorny problem. And the story that I like to tell is basically around how actually what got me into this whole cloud game was a pig farm. And that was because we had a customer who had a fly-on-the-wall documentary about a pig farm, and 1 hour a day for 4 weeks a month, so 4 hours in total in the entire year, their traffic for that 1 hour, which is as soon as the TV show finished, went absolutely through the roof. And their normal hosting architecture, which could have coped on a $100 a year shared hosting account, needed 7 servers just to stay up and running. And the tricky problem with that is, how do you deal with burstable traffic like that? And the only way back then, traditionally, was, well, you have 7 servers sitting there for the entire year and you just pay for the whole thing. Well, funnily enough, massive hosting architecture wasn't exactly top priority on the list of things that a pig farm wanted to worry about. And so it kind of got us thinking, there's got to be a better way of doing this. We started building the technology that we now sell as a piece of software, which is Flexiant Cloud Orchestrator, to build our own public cloud platform to allow companies to burst up and down their capacity on demand. And in 2007, we launched that, and that was the first public cloud platform in Europe and the second one in the world behind Amazon. A while went on, and that was doing very well. It was growing 30% month on month, but we realized that actually the IP that we had and the knowledge that we built up was actually more valuable as a software solution and selling and servicing other service providers than it was us carrying on running our own public cloud platform. So at the end of 2009, we spun out and became a software company. In 2010, we launched the first version of our software, which was known as Xtility back then. And fast forward to today, and we've launched the second version of our software a few months ago, and basically provides complete solution for hosting companies wanting to move into the cloud. Everything from hypervisor network and storage management through to customer metering, billing, self-service capabilities, end-user portals, the works. I'm not going to spend the next half hour pitching what we do. That's my pitch about us, to give you our background. But hopefully now I'm going to tell you some of the things that we've learned from conversations with customers and our own journey into the industry. So first and foremost, cloud is no longer a buzzword, and you've got all these megalithic, if that's a word, companies that have suddenly entered the market. You've got Amazon as the industry leader in infrastructure as a service, and they're generating, apparently, no one knows for sure, over $1 billion in revenue. You've got Microsoft, you've got Google, you've got all these other companies coming in. an awful lot of traditional hosting companies that have sat there and said, we can carry on shipping dedicated servers out and traditional boxes and it'll be fine, and that industry, that'll keep going. And the reality is that if you look at where hosting is now, traditional hosting, and you look at where it was when the web was born in 92, 93, the only thing that's changed is the numbers. It's bigger hard disks, more bandwidth, everything else. The technology's not changed, the provisioning's not changed. And the reality is cloud has not just changed that, it's completely reinvented it. To use the buzzword that I keep hearing, it's a paradigm shift in the way that things are provisioned and managed. And the reality is, cloud is here today, it's not going away, and there's some very, very big players that are dominating in ways that hosters didn't completely expect. So the time is now to do something about this. It's not a case of sticking your head in the sand and ignoring it. And I've had a number of interesting conversations with companies in the cloud market or in the hosting market about what they're trying to do to differentiate and everything else. And some of them are enlightened and realizing they need to do these things, and some of them sit there and think, well, we can carry on bleeding our customers dry and not being flexible and sign them up to 3-year contracts. And the reality is they're going to start really hurting pretty soon. So that sounds like I'm spelling doom for everybody. Well, the reality is it's not too late. The existing hosting market is very fragmented as it is. Cloud isn't going to change that. You're not going to be in a position where I don't know if any of you know the phrase that Thomas Watson of IBM once said, which was 4 computers will be enough for everybody. It's not going to be a position where 4 clouds is going to be enough for everybody, where you'll have Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and some other. It will continue to be a fragmented market, and in fact, it's actually a great market to be in right now. So, is segmentation valid? Is fragmenting, is that a valid approach? Well, the thing is, you look at all these Amazons and Googles and everyone else, the massive companies in this market, and what they're basically doing is providing a commodity service. They have customer support and everything else, but it's not differentiated. You can come along with a credit card and buy it, and that's great. But actually, and any hoster trying to beat Amazon at their own game or everyone else is in the long term going to fail. And that's not me saying that you can't match Amazon on price. Amazon's actually got pretty good margins on what they currently sell. It's totally doable, even at a smaller scale, to match Amazon on price today. But they've dropped their pricing for different pieces 20 times in the last 18 months. You don't see traditional hosters dropping their pricing continuously. That's not a game that you can win on. What you can win on is by differentiating, probably based on the lines you already do, and that's the beauty. You've all got existing customer bases. You've all got a niche of some kind. Sorry, I'm in America. A niche of some kind. Thanks, George. A niche of some kind that is valid for you, and that might be geography, it might be industry, it might be customer service, it might be location or latency of where your data center is, but that's what you basically need to build on into the cloud. And the good thing is that cloud doesn't mean you have to reinvent your business models. It doesn't mean that you suddenly have to become commoditized with everybody else. And in fact, we believe that this is the decade of the service provider. So, as I say, I ran a hosting provider for 12 years, doing shared, dedicated, managed, and everything else. But the reality was, what we actually did there was we hosted websites for companies. And we kind of sat there in 2007, 2008 and went, well, most people that have got a website, need a website, have already got one. And okay, the traffic will carry on growing and everything else, but that's where this market's going to grow. It's not suddenly going to be that 90% of businesses still need their own website. And the reality where we are, and so that side of the market's actually quite mature. But the reality is where we are now is enterprise IT requirements are moving out to the service provider like never before, at a rate that's increasing and increasing. And so all of a sudden, enterprises are looking to hosters and service providers to actually host their enterprise applications for them, whether that's their internal applications on infrastructure as a service, whether it's on PaaS or SaaS applications. And so it's actually a great time to be in the market, and which is why there's plenty of opportunity there. But again, it comes down to differentiated service. So the interesting thing about differentiated service, coming back to the commoditization thing. So here's a graph from a report that Microsoft has actually just done on where private cloud's going to work in the future, and does it make sense? And what you're basically seeing is that the majority of people think that private cloud is a natural evolution from virtualization, which makes sense, and that on top of that, nearly 50% of people actually think it represents the future of systems management. So they see that's the way that things are going. And the interesting statistic on here at the very bottom actually is that private cloud is just there for those that are scared of public cloud. The problem is what they don't really mean there is public cloud. They mean commodity clouds, because there's all the workloads, or the extra work they need to do to actually make it work in the way that they need. The one thing this report doesn't differentiate, and here's where there's a massive, massive opportunity for service providers, is where does that private cloud actually sit? A lot of companies that are used to having this architecture internally in their own data centers, actually there's no reason why they couldn't have that out externally in a private data center managed by a service provider, still giving them the degree of control that they want. And that's a key way that you can actually differentiate by offering private cloud services, or a mixture of private and public, but that are focused on your particular niche in the market. And that might be in terms of the hardware that you use, the hypervisor you use, the offerings and the service offerings and pricing structure that you offer. But there's an awful lot of potential there. And so here's another slide from the same report on where companies actually see their value heading and their resources heading. And they're basically, the really interesting factor in this, coming back to the fact that hosting used to be about websites, not about internal IT, is that first and foremost, just about everyone sees most of their internal IT being built into a private cloud of some kind, but then a significant amount, sort of 30% and growing, see that also being in a hosted service. So they're then even now open to the idea that it's going to move out to the public environments, just not necessarily, as you'll see at the bottom, specifically into public or commodity clouds. And actually that's where, to reiterate the point, that's where there's spectacularly large value in there in terms of providing capabilities. And this has again been reinforced by VCs and guys from just down the road from here, that they're fully expecting cloud service providers to be the dominant play in this industry. If you look at announcements lately from Microsoft, you look at private equity investments that have been coming in, and you'll see that everyone's realizing that this truly is the decade of the service provider, and that is the way that the applications are slowly moving. I'm not saying that companies will not have their own internal IT and they'll rely on everything being outsourced, but I think over time, as hardware refreshes come in, companies look at the CapEx versus the OpEx problems, they will start to see the benefit more and more of actually moving out to service providers, and that's what people need to take a grasp of, because the traditional service provider model of, we can sell you a bunch of tin on a 3-year contract, just isn't going to cut it. And so on to where you can actually really differentiate. So I've talked a lot about the public cloud and about the enterprise IT, and the reality is that hosters are very good in the middle area there. So that in providing their own differentiated public cloud, providing their own differentiated private cloud or pseudo-private cloud services. And what can happen from there? There's kind of 2 levels of differentiation that can actually happen. One of which is building your own infrastructure as a service type platform, which is where we can come in and help. And that's great, but actually what you still don't want to do then is just be in a position where you are in the same game that people have seen in shared hosting, which I found hilarious, which is basically where every 18 months or 2 years people will end up going, instead of having 100 gigabytes of bandwidth, you can now have 1,000 gigabytes of bandwidth, and it won't cost you any more money, because actually we all know you're only using 5. That model is dead, because companies actually want to pay for what they're using and get good service out of it, not be promised the moon for $6 a month and then get nothing out of it. And so where this gets really, really interesting is having a cloud-capable platform with tightly integrated metering and billing and provisioning capabilities, allows service providers to rapidly move up to the next level in this, in that they can actually move up into providing application and value-added services, and this is where there's significant value to gain. For example, you look at services that are providing SaaS applications, or even very simple things like hosted WordPress. Companies look at the value proposition completely differently. If you've got a shared web hosting account or a virtual machine dedicated to hosting resources, and you get a gigabyte of RAM and you get 20 gigabytes of disk and a little bit of bandwidth, you can get a fairly good margin on that, and there's reasonably decent revenue on that. If you can put on top of that an integrated WordPress platform or Drupal, or could be an enterprise app, could be an Oracle DB, whatever it might be, all of a sudden the value to the customer is completely different, and so the revenue can be much higher, the margins can be much higher. And so it's not just that you need to be able to provide infrastructure as a service, but you need to see that that's a key stepping stone to jumping forward into providing much more advanced capabilities. And where we basically see the long term in that is if we went through a process that we called Service Provider 2020, which is where a service provider is actually going to look and what are they going to be like in 2020. And it's going to be radically different to the way it is now. You will have, service providers will be the dominant force in providing IT services to small businesses and to enterprises. And they will provide a wide range of services that will be for everything from infrastructure to platform to software as a service. Because no customer wants just one thing. They never just want virtual machines or just want software as a service. So they all want a variety, and you need to be able to provide them all in one place and through one system, and track and meter and bill everything in one place. But equally, what will get really interesting there is service providers will actually also move to a position where some of the services they're not offering, so they are offering even, are not actually in their own data centers, and they're actually provided by other companies. And that's very alien to a lot of service providers who would never consider doing that. But that is the way it's going to go, because it's about focusing on what your niche is, focusing on what you do best and how you differentiate, extending that into the cloud, but then moving on from there and actually delivering a wide range of additional capabilities and upsell capabilities to those customers very, very easily. The risk in all this is twofold. One, there's a technology risk in how do you do this, and two, then there's a commercial risk in how do you actually migrate your business models to actually work in that way. And they kind of come hand in hand, because to reiterate a point I made earlier, cloud isn't going away. For those of you that don't have a cloud strategy already, you need one. And I can tell you from our own experiences, being a service provider that decided to build this technology and turn ourselves into a software company, the time, the resources, the experience you need to do that is not something most service providers can actually do themselves. They don't have the budgets, they certainly don't have the time to do that. And it's not a case of throwing money at it and getting 100 developers to get working on it. It will take you 6 months at best, a couple of years at worst, to build this kind of technology if you're going to do it yourself. And that's through our own experience of having done this now for the last 8 years. So that's one side, and then you have the how do you actually manage it and how do you do the billing and the metering, because what you need to be in is a position where you can actually bring all this integrated data together, because what we've seen from a number of hosting providers is they're not just losing out on possibilities, they're actually losing out on current revenue from being in a position where they can't track everything that's actually being used, or they can't deliver innovative business models based on what's actually being used. So a classic example of that is, I know some cloud providers that have a storage model where the storage they charge per gigabyte of space is really, really expensive. And the reason they make it really, really expensive is the fact that they don't actually know how to bill for the disk I/O, which is actually the really expensive bit, separately from the space. And so they basically have to amortize them together and hope that they get away with it. And what actually happens there is the low usage customers get penalized and the high usage customers get away with it. which attracts high usage customers, which actually increases the service provider's problem. And so these are the kind of problems you have to think about when you're building a cloud platform. How do you do the fine-grainedness? How do you differentiate through your product offering? Do you want to give full, complete self-service to your customers and let them spin up machines and up and down? Some of you will absolutely want to do that. Some of you will think that's a horrific idea and want to run away from it. You might actually have two different types of customer base where you want some of those to do that, so unmanaged and managed. You need to be able to have a solution that can deal with all these problems. Otherwise, what you'll end up with is not being in a very defensible position and losing that business over time. And the classic example here is, so we've been selling this software for a couple of years now, and we spoke to a number of hosting companies in Europe back in sort of 2010, and they said, it's of no interest to us. We don't have customers asking for this. Fast forward a year, 18 months, and they come to us and going, we're losing business to Amazon hand over fist, because what was happening was these customers, their end user customers were building solutions based on Amazon for development and test because it was so much more flexible. Spin it up, use it, shut it down again. And because they got used to that, when it came to putting it live, they said, we'll just leave it on Amazon. That's fine. It works for us. We've proved it in the work that we've done. And all of a sudden, they were losing production-level environments and big business and said, we need a solution right now. So the reality is, what you need to do, if you haven't had customers coming to you and saying, you need a cloud strategy, what are you doing in cloud? Trust me, they're looking around instead and seeing what else is out there, because it's actively happening, and you will see it in your revenues dropping in the future if you don't right now. So excuse me 1 second. Ooh. That's going to be a little hard to actually talk about, seeing as the character set doesn't appear to be on this computer. So what this is actually meant to say is there's 5 different main concepts that are on this slide, so apologies for that not working. I don't know why that's come up strange, which is basically, are there riches in niches? Is there ways for you, by focusing on a particular niche, to actually be able to survive? And so there's some key points that you need to think about in this area. There's how do you differentiate? And I'll keep saying that word, and I'm being deliberately repetitious about it because it is all about differentiation in this business now. It's not about being $1 cheaper than the guy down the road. Some business models can get away with that, a lot of them can't anymore. It's about finding your particular area, your particular focus, so you can be an absolute leader in that area. It might be geography, it might be service, it might be the pricing model that you use, it might be the flexibility of how you work, it might be the applications that you deliver on top of the platform and the services you deliver on top. But you need to find an area where you can be the absolute de facto leader in that area. And that gives you several benefits, one of which is defensibility in terms of churn, customers moving around, because people talk about interoperability with clouds and how it's a problem, but the reality is that what cloud's actually done compared to traditional hosting is made it easier for companies to move between hosting providers more than ever. It's still not trivial, but it will become more and more trivial as time goes on, and there is companies that actually deliberately help make that happen. So what you need to be able to do is provide services that are defensible in that way. It's about efficiency through being able to actually, by focusing on a particular area, become as efficient as you can in that area. And that obviously leads to higher margins, so that can actually help you, not just higher margins in terms of value-added services, but higher margins in terms of your business. The reality is a solution like this should be able to massively increase the efficiency of your own internal environments. I know it's made a massive change to us. At one point, I think we had, when we were running the hosting business, we peaked at about 800 servers, and we had an average of about 1 member of staff for about 80 servers was what they were looking after. With cloud, we're seeing ratios of 1 to 400 to 1,000 in terms of what they're able to look after. That's the massive difference it can make. So both in terms of provisioning, agility, recovery, there's massive benefits you can make. And then finally, of course, by actually differentiating in all those ways, you can actually improve the overall service level that you can give to your customers, and not just meaning uptime. Uptime is the starting point. If you can't do 4 nines or 5 nines these days, then you're not even you've not even started out the gate. But in terms of the whatever it might be, the latency, the service offering, the support level, etc., etc. I'm going to skip that slide because that makes even more sense, but I'll just talk about it very quickly. So basically the key in this is finding your niche. So what is it that actually makes you guys so special? It may be obvious to some people, it may not be obvious. You may not have one at the present time. So what you need to do is actually look into that, investigate what it is that brings customers to you, what keeps customers with you, and then find out and work. And we're very happy as a company to have these kind of discussions from a commercial point of view, is to help you guys understand how you can take that into a cloud model, because it isn't about reinventing your business, it's about extending it into cloud services with whatever makes you special as to begin with. So doing well here with these slides screwing up. So what niche initiatives actually demand? So for anyone that wants a proper copy of these slides, I can arrange it later on as well. So what niche initiatives actually demand is a number of key areas in which you actually need to be able to, that enable you to differentiate. And I've talked about a number of these already, but just to go over them again. You've got the ability to differentiate through service levels, the ability to differentiate through offerings, and whether that's that you can offer very large servers, or you can offer private cloud or single tenant type services, or whether it's support levels, or whether it's integrated applications. But the key is actually being able to deliver all these to deliver what your niche actually is. The reason velocity is in the middle of that is the key that you've got to get a move on with this in reality. You haven't got 2 years to spend trying to work out how you can actually do this. You need to actually go and do this now and have a software solution that can actually help you achieve that. And whatever software solution that might be, and actually allow you to grow going into the future. So in short, just to leave a little bit of time for questions, we believe the future is the service provider. It's actually the greatest time to actually be in the service provider market than it's ever been before. The time is now to actually get a move on and do things, because it's going to be a transformative next few years in terms of how the service model is going to work. And you need to start thinking about exactly where your niche is, or where you're going to move to win that market, to give yourself a defensible position. Because with people like Amazon and Microsoft and Google coming in, they're always going to beat you on CapEx. They're always going to beat you on discounted cash flow in terms of actually being able to build bigger and better. There is no contest in that respect. So the question is, how are you actually going to differentiate? We have a white paper on that respect, which you can download from the website. The address is there if you need it, on what to consider and how to overcome the barriers in becoming a cloud provider. And as I said, that's kind of 2 key areas really, which is you've got the technology challenges and then you have the organizational challenges, and they are both as important as each other. So we're basically able to help with that. If it's of interest, just a quick direct link to our website. We've got a lot more white papers and information on there about the future of the service provider, about some of the capabilities that you should be considering in terms of metering and billing and service offerings that you can actually offer. Right, so that's me all done. So if there's any questions at all? Yep.
So, sorry, you said you were giving some examples of how to be different in service levels and something else. Can you give more examples? I mean, do you have more examples just like drop off the top of your head?
Sure. I may repeat some of what I already said, but so there's a number of ways in which to differentiate. The service levels is a really interesting one, actually, because to a lot of people, what service levels and what SLA means is how fast a connection is going to be or what the percentage uptime is. And the reality is that kind of does for websites, but it doesn't necessarily do for enterprise applications. It's about response times to support, it's about security, it's about provisioning times, it's about the whole service offering that they're looking for a service level on. That area I think is key, especially for smaller hosting providers, and by smaller I mean anyone that isn't doing tens of millions, because you need to find ways to differentiate. So one of the things that we've found, especially when we've been talking to sort of traditional managed hosting providers, is that they've got this big conundrum of, well, how do I offer all these great capabilities and I don't destroy my existing managed services revenue? And so what they're actually doing is using the underlying technologies to be able to deliver a higher service level to their customer by being able to provision faster, by being more agile in what they can do. And that's directly benefiting their bottom line, even if they're actually not selling anything new to their customers at all, but their customers are just seeing them as improving their service level. So a really quick example on that one, we talk managed service provider in the UK that does large, complex enterprise IT. And so what they had was they had test and dev projects where for their customers, where they'd have a project running for a month and then they'd want to decommission it and recommission it into a completely new infrastructure for a different project. And it would take them 2 weeks and huge amounts of manpower, because they'd literally have to wipe all the software, take all the kit out, re-rack it in a different configuration. These days it takes them more like half an hour. Because by using virtualization and being able to actually do it as a service, they've abstracted all that out. As far as their customer's concerned, they're still getting the same service, but now the turnaround times and everything is so much better. So it's really, I think the whole point that I want to get at is, it's not, you should look at things like infrastructure and service as an enabler of what already makes you special that you can then build on. And that could be right down to what industry you're focused on. It could be location. I know there's a lot of hosters, certainly in the UK, and I suspect more in the US, that they are the hoster for that town or that city or that state, and that's what their stamp is, because people feel comfortable dealing with someone locally. And if that's what it is, then great. So use these kind of technologies to build from there, to enhance what you already do. It's not necessarily about reinvention. Does that answer your question? Cool. Anybody else? Right, well, thank you very much, everyone. I think that's pretty much me. If you want to come and ask any more questions, feel free to do so. We've got a stand, a booth down in the exhibition hall, number 432, if you want to come and have a chat at all. And I say, if you want to download the white paper, you can do. And finally, tiny last commercial bit, if you actually ever want to play with our technology and our software, you can actually download it for free from our website. There we have a free version of it that you can use forever. So feel free to go and have a look at that. There's also a number of videos that we've done from our existing customers where we've sat them down and just said, okay, tell us why you picked us. Not scripted, completely open. Tell us the good things and the bad things, and we've recorded those videos, and they've actually explained to us what's made the difference for them. So they're coming from the same position that a lot of you guys are coming from. And they explain their thought processes and where they are today and how they got there. So they're really good to watch. I strongly recommend them. Okay, thank you very much.